can't move, and you get the planes kind of drifting and then heading up. I like shots in movies like that where you can kind of look at it and be like, that was hard, an animator made that decision, and it was the total right decision, kind of thing. And you kind of, if anything, just have a slight moment of appreciation for, like, that's a level of detail that most people aren't going to notice, but I noticed.
Well, I'm glad because that shot was almost cut at some point.
Really?
Yeah, and I thought I had to bring it back, and then Hanzhi is like he has like some special skills about like aviation, right?
I just love planes, so that was my thing. I was just trying to get the flying physics of the planes. Wherever we can get it into the shot, try and keep it realistic. But
which one was your favorite shot in the movie?
Well, now that you said one of mine.
No, you don't have to pick one of mine. You don't have to.
Now you have to say.
I mean, it would be a pretty jerk thing not to at this point.
You could love the same shot, just FYI.
I was going to say, like the missile almost hitting the boat and the big fireball and the boat rocks, and it was a nice simulation.
So only Alessandro doesn't know what he likes from.
No, I do know. I mean, I have too many shots that I liked. But there's not like one in particular.
You have a sequence that you like, or?
Well, I love the sequences both like Top Gun and Red Hawk, but there are some shots also that some of other vendors worked on, in particular at the end of the movie, because you film the film and you shoot it, and then eventually you swap sequence order, and so at the end when Sam go to the raft and talk to Ross when he's in prison, that scene was shot, the order was much later, where he didn't have his arm on a sling anymore. But now it's before he goes to Joaquin at the hospital where he's wearing a sling. So we had to basically CG his both arms, because the original scene he was just snacky, and we had to put an arm on a sling, and also the other arm because he was standing like this. So it's not just one arm, even the other one, and that was like 6-7 shots done by Barnstorm, and they did a great job, because those are the stuff it's great to make those kind of effects that people don't see, invisible effects.
Invisible effect, as we call them.
Yeah.
And how many other vendors worked on it, on the movie with you?
So we had Wētā DD, Barnstorm, UPP, Outpost, Luma Picture. Luma did all the stern work, all the head replay. Basically, it was a full CG head that we did.
And that's actually a good point. I think most people that would watch the movie would think that's a prosthetic. Yeah. It's not. It's all digital.
Yeah, that was
beautiful. Yeah.
So there was Luma, and then Scanline. They did one shot, but it was a good one. And then Crafty Apes and Opsys, SDFX, and that's plus again, the DD previous team.
Yes.
So. Yeah.
And in working together with the team, and talking about the different types of pipeline, that was never an issue in terms of any kind of, using the same software, proprietary software. I mean, DD and Wētā, you guys work together all the time, so that's old relationship, but any of the new vendors working together, there was never a pipeline issue or anything like that, today anyways.
There shouldn't be, right? That's kind of the way we share assets has been the standard. Back in my days when I was vendor, it was all Alembic, which was maybe a little bit trickier. I think that now with USD probably you can get more information, but at the end what you do, you bake the geometry, you bake the textures, you give a turntable, and then every vendor has their look dev artist that their job is to put the things together. So I guess that it becomes more complicated when you're sharing maybe a complex effect. So that maybe it's been developed like with a lot of custom tool, like back in my days we used to have like custom tool all the time in effects. And so when you have to share with another vendor, you can't share your custom tool, so you know how you, in this case I don't think there was much custom stuff.
Well, the only thing I'd point out is there's an effect that happens through the film that 3 vendors had to do, which is the vibranium effect.
Oh, yeah.
And we, I think we were kind of all probably working on it in parallel at one point, but that's something that had to be shared, and we're all, anytime you're doing an effect like that, it's not all based out of look dev. A lot of it's going to be comp and how comp treats everything as well too. So you're talking at that point, effects is generating a bunch of layers of animated textures and this sort of thing that are all going into comp. You've got a compositor that's really good at developing effects in comp, and they're working on things, creating a prototype, showing the client that's an iterative process to get approved. But then while you're doing this, we've got other vendors that need to do that same effect, right? So you're being asked, hey, we need to get something to that other vendor, and you're like, well, this thing has been Frankenstein together at this point, So there's always a bit of a difficulty there when it's not something like it's a texture breakdown or it's a geo breakdown thing, but it's something that's slightly more subjective, and it's a lot of artistry involved with the state that it's in at that point when you need to start passing it off. We almost felt really bad about what we passed Dee Dee at that point when I was like, oh, here you go. But in the end, every now and then you run across things like that are a little more, just less cut and dry.
Yeah, and usually when there's like this type of development that happens at the same time between multiple vendors, what we do as supervisor, we say, oh, look, Wētā did something that looks cool, let me share it with the other vendor. And then the other vendor say, oh, but I like that one, so you share it better. It's a little bit, so it can become a little bit cumbersome at times because, they're working over each other's, but at the end of the day, it's still a collaboration. I try to get the best that you can.
And continuity, maybe,
exactly.
in the final look of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, and Hanzhi kind of hit on it earlier, even with Captain America, we had the model from the TV show, and that's kind of where everything started from. We passed that to them because they were going to own that asset on this film. They made the changes that were required for the design of this, and there were changes made. It wasn't exactly the same Wakandan wings. It was a little bit different. The backpack was a little bit different.
And I think there's a Sony ImageWorks version of it.
Yeah, and there's a Sony, and so they gave it back to us, and then we looked at it and we're like, well, we're having this insertion problem with the wings where we can't figure out how to, you could try and comp it between the backpack, but unless it's a very specific kind of camera, that falls apart. So we went back to Ali and we're like, hey, we've got an issue with this. We can't figure out how to make this work. And I'm asking, how is Dee Dee handling it? And he goes back, and Hanzhi and I talk, and Hanzi's like, we're not handling it. We have the same problem. So then it's like they're going to go back and they're going to make a design change on it, and they're going to update that, send it back to us. We're going to run it back to our pipeline, and they're doing the animation test on it. Then we're going to take the animation articulation test and roll it into ours. And so it was a big cyclical thing back and forth with those wings and back and forth. And patience, you have to be patient with the other vendor because they're working through stuff. But at the same time, you're chomping at the bit, and we're talking to these guys about like, we got to have this thing now. And we know, from back channels, they're working through it, kind of stuff. And so
the wings don't have to open or close in our sequence, so why is it?
Yeah. He's like, it's like, how are you doing this open and close thing? He's like, we don't care. so it's those sorts of things. But we've been around a while. We know how this works.
This is funny because you got the trailer shot where we first see the wings, right, in the original trailer. But because it was like a perfect, from behind, they could cheat the position of the wings. While we're still trying with Hanzhi to figure out how we're gonna do on a 3/4 shot because there was no space to put the wings between either his back and the backpack, and the backpack is tiny. And so with Hanzhi, Dee Dee, and the team, they come up with a design to basically displace the backpack, right? And create
we redesigned
some clearance so that the wings could go in. And we also had to, another thing that backpack was, I think it came from last episode of the TV show, where you never see him flying without the shield on his back and red wings under, and red wings is actually the proportion. In our scene, we have, in Top Gun particularly, he was flying, and even at the end in Red Hawk, with the shield on his arm, and there was no place for a thruster on it. So that's another thing that we had at some point. Well, let's find a place to put the thrusters in the back. And so some stuff evolved just by necessity, I guess.
So what about that moment when he went like that, and
in Top Gun?
Yeah, no, when
on the Ace Point.
Yes.
We just cheated the daylights out of it.
And was that frame by frame? I just want to know if it was.
Well, what we found is the wings don't do that. First off, they would have to bend a crazy amount to be able to do that, right? So we kind of had to pose it to camera a little bit. So there was shots where the wings were completely detached from his back, covering his front to get it. We also had to stretch the wings a little bit, which is always a fine line because there's actually some detail, like kind of carbon fibery detail, stuff on the actual metal itself, so the UVs would start to warp and you'd see it, which it did at times. We had to go back and correct some. So we just had to do typical cheats to make that work. The wings don't do that at all. So
yeah, that was tricky because the first part of the wings are supposed to be metal, right? And they're not supposed to bend. But then we had to bend them somehow, and without, as you said, there's some stretching, and then because there's texture everywhere, if you stretch them too much, then you see the texture stretching. So, yeah, that was fun.
I've got an online question that ties in. What were the biggest visual effects challenges?
I think in this case was mostly story based, like I guess they can talk about on their own, like the part, like the Red Hawk and the Top Gun. As far as us, the challenge was that the story evolves throughout production, and trying to maintain a process without like too much like let's go back to one and restart in this way, was trying to work in a way that allows us to basically work for the story. Top Gun in particular went through a few iterations because of like trying to simplify the story, and again, every time you make a change on one shot or on a little bit, they can trigger changes on surrounding part. And for Top Gun, we went through that a lot. In fact, Cameron, the previous supervisor, stayed on the show until very late, because when we were making some story changes on Top Gun, it was much quicker for us to do it with previs, while they were keep working on the scene. They were like there and try to make the adjustment, but keeping in mind the connection that we were having on the other shot, because in a scene like Top Gun, just cutting a shot can trigger continuity problems. So I think that was the biggest challenge, because I know that both DD and Wētā, they had the technology and the skills and the artists to pull everything off, but trying to maintain like a workflow while changes happen, and it's part of, we know in visual effects, but in the filmmaker world things change, but visual effects, it's tricky, so
yeah, I think they were just moving shots around and shuffling in the edit to make the scene play out smoother and more more exciting. But now the sun's on the wrong side. We have to go back and figure out, okay, how do we undo all these knots that now the continuity is all kind of broken, so we just have to go back and work back through everything.
Yeah, one thing that happened is that I was heavily involved with the Top Gun, even with the ending, the change when they're working on changes, I was always part of those meetings, so I was always there earlier on, and like being able to make some judgment call and say, yes, we can do that because it's not going to affect too many shots. Or sometimes I would say, we can't do it because if we are changing this one, then it's going to do a domino effect on other shots. So that, I think, it allows us to progress. And, we were talking pretty much every other day and try to make sure that we're always like, on track.
So it was a collaboration daily.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to map out where we were flying on the whiteboard, but eventually I stopped.
Good old whiteboard.
I would say it's a very similar issue. I mean, I think as we talked earlier, is the previs that we had done on our scene was followed pretty to a T on set. I mean, the shot boards we had out there were the previs shots, all the way to the cameras and stuff. There were a few subtle little changes, but that was the scene.
So that was lucky.
Yeah, well, it was lucky as you shot, but then as they're pointing out, some changes were made, editorial changes, and whole subplots removed, and as soon as you start taking a broadsword at that sort of stuff, now you're in continuity hell, to the point where you're saying, where we've got action that's taking place here in the Rose Garden, and now I'm cutting to something over here, and you're like, oh, how do we make that work, Sometimes it's lighting, sometimes it's just positional changes. The layout's completely different, because action happened between there and here. Now the whole set is different than what it was, So then you're getting into a bunch of plate reconstruction, trying to fix the issues, And it's those, I think, were probably, the rest of the challenges were known. You go into it, you break the scene. Show down.
Testing.
Yeah, you got to show you break it down. You know what the challenges are. No, seriously. But it's like those are the unforeseen ones that you don't know they're coming, right? So you're kind of just constant reaction to those, trying to make them work. And at some point, continuity doesn't matter, as long as the action's great. But it's our job to worry about it until they tell us we don't have to worry about it. So,
Of course.
Got a question about Harrison Ford's signature scar on his chin. With his darker hair as Red Hulk, how much of that would be visible in the Red Hulk?
you're going to see it. We kept all the subtleties, and that's the real obvious stuff. There's other little blemishes that he's got that are on the character as well too. I did get one note from Harrison the other night at the premiere. I asked him, what he thought of everything, and he said he loved it. And he said, but I've got one note, and I was like, oh, I didn't know if he was joking or he was serious. He was totally serious. And he said, when I was a younger man, I did not have black hair. I had brown hair. And I kind of laughed, and I was like, well, you're going to have to talk to Marvel about that one.
I was very observant of the scar there, because, I think one of the things you mentioned earlier, Dan, is you strive to, maintain certain resemblance to Harrison in the transformation, right?
Yeah, the hair was like, I think there was a conversation about not making like white hair, right?
Oh, that's a good point, actually. When we originally had pitched the idea of bringing Harrison's design, or Harrison Ford's face into the character, we presented this to the studio. We presented the studio, they liked it, and Nate and Keanu, our producers, loved it, Julius loved it, and they said, okay, well, we need to show Kevin, because this is Kevin's baby, right, Kevin Feige. I mentioned, I was like, well, let me know what they think, and I was told, well, you're going to be presenting, and I was like, oh, okay, so we were in there, and it was presented to Kevin, and to his credit, he loved it, and he actually wanted to lean in. We had given a more youthful look to the Hulk, kind of like a 35-year-old Harrison Ford, and he corrected that. He's like, no, lean into the age. So that's when we went back and added the salt and pepper to the character itself. We brought wrinkles back in, some aging back in from Harrison, which is better for us, because again, the translation from the facial capture and stuff like that always works better when it looks more like what he is now. But yeah, that was Kevin's idea. So.
Fantastic. And we have a beautiful audience here. Do you guys have any burning questions for these guys? They've been in the front lines here working on all those shots, frame by frame, believe it or not. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask them? All right, we have a hand up there.
What was the one shot that Scanline did for this wonderful film? And this is a wonderful film. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's the shot at the end when Sam flies to the raft with the helicopter and landing on the raft, and they did it, and they didn't even let me give in too many notes because the studio loved it. It was like one of Lou's favorite shot. Yeah, they really did it very well. That was the one. Yes.
Fantastic. So this is a superhero show, and it would be very remiss of me to not ask, who is your favorite superhero? Silence.
Steve Rogers.
It doesn't have to be a superhero. It can be someone in your life. It can be me, But who is your favorite superhero? I'm going to go to Hanzhi.
That's a curveball question.
I'll go first. My daughter is my superhero because she makes me think twice about things that I thought I was always right on, and it bothers me, but I think she has made me a better person. So over to you, Hans.
No, I think having worked on 7 of these, I think Thor is probably my favorite.
I think mine is my wife, because anybody who does this job knows that this job is very demanding, especially at times it's really demanding. And I've got 2 young kids at home, and she has a full-blown career herself, very successful, but she holds down the fort and does everything that allows me to do what I do. So I would say my wife.
And Alessandro?
I have many. I don't really have one. I think that everybody that have an influence on my life, I consider superheroes, because I think there are more than one superhero. You know, as I mentioned before, Yasamin is like played a crucial role last year. She's sitting there. I think she deserves an applause. The reason being that, you know, you go through life, you go through family losses, and I found myself working on this movie while going through a hard time, and she was there very supportive. So she's one of my superheroes. My sister is another one of my superheroes. And my dad is my superhero just because he's just so proud of me. So I think that there are many of us out there.
Yeah, and you know, we work in visual effects. It's about passion, it's about love of craft, and it's about collaboration. And I think that this is not a job. If it was a job, we wouldn't be doing this kind of work, because when things are difficult and there are challenges and you can't figure it out and you're scratching your head, that's when you dig deep, because you love it. And I think, and that's why after so many years, I'm still doing this, because I still have childlike curiosity. And I learned so much on every job. And for you guys, I mean, you know, you're at the forefront every day and you do the same.
100%. Every project is a learning experience, no matter how far you are in the career. And we know our industry got a little bit tougher in the last few years, and you know, there are a lot of like, I would say, backlash on the CGI, and you know, directors that don't like to say that they use the visual effects. You know, I think that visual effects is just a tool to an end, like everything else. Some movies require visual effects to be made, like our movie or some other movies. Some others still rely on visual effects to have telling stories, but you know, I think it's like an industry where if you're passionate, and you know, like me, I've been in this industry for like 30 years almost, and I keep doing it because I have passion, right? And every project for me, I take every project with passion, not as like a payday. Otherwise, for the stress we're going through, that's the wrong job, 100%, right? So, and then shoot this guy too, because they was.
Dad and Hanzhi, before we, I think the lights were dim.
Oh yeah, no, I second that. You know, the industry over the last 2 years has been pretty rough for most people, and you know, a lot of companies have let people go that hopefully are on our way back, and you're seeing a lot of people being pulled back in. I know that at Wētā right now we're underwater with work, which is a good thing.
Underwater.
Yeah. This is a big thing on Avatar 3 coming down the road, but we, you know, the hope is that things continue, and like I said, this taboo of visual effects goes away. You know, we had a really big peak, and then all of a sudden we're kind of considered negative to a film to have it. I think that's just more about bad visual effects showing up on camera more than anything else. Nobody complains about good ones. It's always when it takes you out of the movie that's the problem. So I think it's important for us in our studios to try and maintain that bar and not allow it to be cheapened by wanting to do things cheaper, faster, just get it out the door and survive. You know, that there's a certain level of integrity that we need to hold to the effects to not add a taboo to it.
I just want to say thanks to my crew that makes this movie coming out in February. Means, you know, there were some good hours put in over the holidays to get this done in time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I want to say. Thanks for.
Thank you, Hanzhi. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Alessandro.
Thank you.
Awesome.